I'm Theo.
And I'm Juliet.
And this is Apologies Accepted.
We offer an entertaining look at some of the big issues in history by examining public apologies of the famous and infamous.
We're looking at politicians, serial killers, actors, and you.
Send us a public apology you would like to make, and we'll read it on the air and give you a chance to redeem yourself, or just get some guilt off your shoulders.
We're here for you. Once a week, maybe more if you're really, really sorry.
This is Apologies Accepted, the podcast. And I'm not Theo.
And I'm not Juliet.
And we're happy to be back with you this week. Theo, what's shakin' bacon?
So I have a big fat strip of bacon, gross, to share with you. Ooh. Yes, because I went to a jazz club last night.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, and
Tell me all about it.
Awesome. Get ready.
Okay.
It was so fun. So it's called Parker's. It's in downtown Austin. Uh-huh. Who knew there was a jazz club in downtown Austin?
Not me.
And yeah, me either. And you know, I mean, so on one hand, I'm such a walking fucking cliche, right? It's like, I have a podcast and I went to a jazz club and I read literature, you know? So it's like, God, here I am. What a surprise. But James is not a jazz fan at all.
Sure.
I'll even say hates, right?
Okay.
But he had a great time. It was his idea. He actually really, really loved it. And
awesome.
The club is so fucking cute. Like, it's heartbreakingly sweet. The owner also plays. The only thing I didn't like about the club, and he sings, like he plays and he sings, and he's sort of the front man for the band, and he and the band have all been together off and on for like 25 years, and they played like the restaurant circuit around Austin, and he's opened up this club just a little bit before COVID. But it's got like a really unique setup because the stage is surrounded on three sides by foam paneling for acoustics. And then the audience is up very close, and he's like, you know, the owner was like, you know, we built this to be a unique space for jazz performers to play. And it was like Winston Marsalis has played there and loves it, right? And so, okay, cool. Loved it all. He's got a nice voice. Band was great. Club was clean, awesome. Staff was great. There's some of those times, you know, I've been to some jazz clubs where it's like, what's on the floor?
I don't want to interrupt, but what made James decide to go if he doesn't like jazz?
He's hosting I almost said a school thing, a work thing, and they need a night activity, so he wanted to check it out and see, because it just felt like a adult thing to go do, right?
Sure.
So one thing about me, I hate woodwinds. Hate them.
That's hilarious.
Hate the clarinet. Hate them. And it stems from an incident that actually did happen in the third grade, where my mom said, okay, you guys need to learn how to play musical instruments.
Oh, no. Okay.
Yep. And so there was like band at school, and I wanted to play the oboe.
Sure.
Right. And the band instructor, the band leader, the band teacher was like, no, you can play the clarinet, though. And the great thing is, if you learn to play the clarinet, then you can play every instrument in the world, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, sure.
And whatever. Did it for like that year. I didn't practice much, and then eventually it just disappeared and never went back, and fine, cool. But yeah, like the whole, like the minute I'm trying to think of that one guy's name. All I can think of is Yanni. You know, the guy that plays like the saxophone or whatever?
There are a lot of guys that play the saxophone.
Yeah, I hate them all. I've never in my life said, oh, great, the saxophone. But okay, so I was being stupid last night, and some guy was playing the bass, which awesome instrument. Yes, beautiful, love it, great, all night long.
Yeah.
So I said to James, that's the biggest violin I've ever seen. Because I thought it was funny.
It is funny.
It is, yeah. He did not think it was funny. And then at one point I wanted to get a video near the end when things were wrapping up. I was like, oh, this is so great. And I'd had like 3 Manhattans. So yeah, not super sharp today.
Awesome.
And I accidentally turned on the light when I was taking the video.
Oh, no.
And lit up the entire room, and about 30 people all turned around and looked at me. Yeah. And so
God.
it lasted about 4 seconds, but they were the 4 longest seconds of my life. So
was it the house band that was playing, or did someone else come in to play, or who was playing?
The house band. The house band.
Woodwind instrument.
The owner. So, and that's a thing that I felt bad about, right? Because I was like, oh my God, I couldn't write a better thing than this, you know? He's the guy that's been working the circuit in town for years and scraped up the money to open his own club. And he's made it just real special the way any jazz musician who's going to build their own club wants it. And then, you know, oh, hooray, here comes the saxophone. So, yeah.
You loved it.
Well, I had a great time at the club. He was really nice. He told some really great stories. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. What a long piece of bacon to share with you. But
that sounds fun.
It was super fun. When you come to Austin, we will have to go do that thing.
All right, cool. We totally will.
Yes. And I'm
never coming to Texas, especially now.
Oh, well, yeah. Hi. I'll bring Parker's with me to San Francisco.
All right. That's cool.
He did mention that he has a very understanding wife who supports his dreams, et cetera, and that he has been
woodwind habit.
Diagnosed with a thing which is called gear acquisition syndrome.
I don't think that's real.
Hey, he said it was a real thing. I totally
My husband
was
has
like,
it too.
Okay, I figured that might resonate with you.
Have I sent you pictures of my husband's studio?
No.
I will. After this call, I will send you pictures. He has a fair amount of gear.
Oh, please do. I love it when people collect things. So what about you?
Bit of a collector. To tell you the truth, I have had a tough couple of days. And it's because, in part, of the Roe v. Wade thing that has really sort of knocked me out. Not that we didn't know it was happening, but to have it actually happen has been really tough. But then, and you're probably going to laugh at this, but yesterday, or the day before yesterday, so there's this woman on TikTok, and her name, her ad or whatever is ShoeLover99, and she's known as Mama Tot. She has 7 followers. She is the sweetest, kindest, just most generous person you'd ever want to meet. She is always talking about, I don't know, she's doing fun stuff like tasting weird foods and things like that. But, she's always like, oh, how's everybody today? I don't know. I'm not that kind of person, unfortunately. So I can't portray how just wonderful a person she is. But I always look forward to watching her TikToks. And she lives in Alabama, and she's just a Southern woman, and she's just the kindest, sweetest thing.
Of course. Is she the one that's like, hi, my little tater tots?
Yes.
I love her.
She is the best person in the world. And so what happened 2 nights ago was her youngest son was shot and killed.
Shut up, no.
Yes, he was at a gas station. I don't know any more than that, but he was shot and killed. And she made a TikTok the next day, just absolutely, completely, just devastated. And I have felt so bad. I mean, this is not about me, but I have just it really has just sort of thrown me for a loop. My heart is just completely broken for her because she's just the kindest person. And now to have this happen to her is just so sad. On top of everything else that's happened in like the last 2 years, it's just I'm just completely knocked out. So that's my week. But yeah, I know. So there's a TikTok, or not a TikTok. There's a GoFundMe for her, and they're trying to raise $75,000, and they've already raised like $200,000 for the funeral expenses and whatever she needs, which is really good. And I sent her some money via Venmo, and you can also send Cash App or whatever. So if you just go to her page, there's links to that stuff. But it's just so sad.
Oh yeah, I had no idea. Yeah, that's wow.
Yeah. So that's really, not to bring the tenor of the show down, but that's kind of how it is lately. Things seem bad and getting worse. So there you go. Welcome to Apologies Accepted, the podcast.
Podcast, yes. Bland and dreary
other than
fun.
that, not too much has been going on. I've just been working. The weather, looking out the window, the weather report for today.
Please.
It is foggy and chilly, so it's about 55, 60 degrees and foggy. Can't complain about the weather. Can't complain about any of that stuff. So that's good. At least it's not really, really hot or anything. How is it? How hot is it there?
Oh, my God. Well, I mean, right now it's a chilly 85 degrees. It is 10:30 in the morning. It will be 105 later in the day. Yeah, it's hot. But
yuck.
No surprise. It's summer, and it's always hot. Yep.
I'm just worried about what's going to happen when it gets to be July and August. I mean, if it's already this hot in so many places, how hot is it going to get?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Hopefully it'll be cooler and surprise everyone. But
I don't know. Global climate change is happening, and that nice middle ground of spring and autumn is disappearing, and we're getting these extremes of super hot, super cold, and
weird things like snow in June in Colorado or whatever it was that they had snow.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening to Apologies Accepted, the podcast.
It's your podcast.
For the day.
Life sucks and it's getting worse. See you later. We love you. Let's talk about Lizzo. Why not?
Let's talk about something that's wonderful and cheery. I agree.
Lift the tone a little bit. So we decided to talk about Lizzo this week. Lizzo's real name is Melissa Vivian Jefferson, and she was born April 27th, 1988, which is like, okay, I remember 1988. I was in college in 1988, so that's a little bit disorienting to think about Lizzo being a full-grown woman having been born in 1988. But that's the way the world works. Lizzo became popular with the release of her third studio album in 2019. It was called 'Cause I Love You, and it peaked in the top 5 of the Billboard 200. The album had 2 singles, one called Juice and one called Tempo, and I don't think I know those 2 songs, but I wasn't really paying attention to Lizzo in 2019, so there's no surprise there. And in the next year, in 2020, she got 8 nominations at the 62nd Annual Grammy Awards, which was the most for any artist that year. Among those 8 nominations were Album of the Year, Song of the Year, Record of the Year, and Best New Artist. And later she won the awards for Best Urban Contemporary Album, Best Pop Solo Performance, and Best Traditional R&B Performance. So tons of awards. Way to go, Lizzo.
Did she win Best New Artist? I hope not, because that's the cursed category. Everybody that wins that.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. Google the winners and look at that list, and where are they now?
Wow.
You won't remember I mean, you'll remember them, but it's like a list of one-hit wonders. I hate to say that.
Well, then she probably didn't win, because she's certainly not a one-hit
she's around.
wonder. She's still around.
Won and broke that, and it might have been Billie Eilish, but there was a thing like, the curse has been broken.
I think I like Billie Eilish now.
I like her when I don't have to listen to her.
You don't like her music?
I like her music fine. It's
you just don't want to listen to her talk?
Part. I don't even mind. Like, I'm so in line with her politics.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm in line with her world perspective.
Yeah.
I think it's just, it's the April Lavigne sort of impersonation where I'm just like, I've seen this act before.
I see. Yeah. She just seems so cute on stage, and she just seems so nice. So I guess that's why I like her right now. I saw her performing on stage, and she just seems to be a genuinely nice person. But I don't know. I mean, there's some other things that we've seen that would indicate otherwise. So all right, let's table talk Billie Eilish for now. We're neutral on Billie Eilish, net neutral.
I like her. I mean, I'm neutral to liking, but
okay.
And
we
maybe
like Billie Eilish.
Maybe the thing that annoyed me was just a little bit of that documentary on her that I saw.
Yeah, which I couldn't even watch. So, yeah. All right. So Lizzo has released a new song, first single from her latest album, which will be called Special. She released it on June 10th of this year, which is just a couple of weeks ago. And in the song, there's some lyrics, including the word spaz. So in the song, she talks about, she says, "I'm a spaz, I'm about to knock somebody out." And of course, that word spaz is a derogatory term for a form of cerebral palsy known as spastic diplegia, which is a tightness of the limbs or the arm or leg muscles, so stiffness of the limbs, which my sister has. So full disclosure. I'm not neutral on this topic. And the song, of course, almost immediately got criticism from disability advocates. People asked her to delete and re-record the single to remove that slur from the lyrics. Talent agent Abby Hills, who has cerebral palsy, said, "It's absolutely shocking. It really made me flinch. Why you would choose that word when there's so many other options? It's just completely wrong." And other fans on social media said there was no excuse for using the derogatory and harmful slur. So what kind of response would you expect from an artist? I personally would expect a defensive response, but Lizzo actually responded with an apology statement and a re-recording of the song. So instead of the phrase "I'm a spaz," she sings "Hold Me Back." Good job, Lizzo, I think. Like I said, I would normally expect people to be defensive and try to make excuses for using the term and, I didn't know, it doesn't mean anything, whatever. But she pretty much immediately re-recorded the song. She didn't even, if I remember the timeline correctly, she didn't even stop to say anything. She just recorded the song and then apologized, re-recorded the song and then apologized.
Yeah, that is what happened.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that there was an NPR article that I read that said that white disabled people in the U.S. and the U.K. were calling her out for using the word spaz without acknowledging the perspective of black disabled people, who raised points about the need for cultural nuance and an intersectional lens to the situation. Melissa Thompson, who's a black disabled activist and licensed social worker, said to NPR, "The erasure of black disabled people when it comes to a black entertainer has been very prominent throughout this whole thing." And black people in the U.S. and the U.K. pointed out how the word, which some say is a part of African-American vernacular English, is used differently by black people within their countries. Thompson wished there were an amplification of black disabled people who understand the nuances of those who use the word and those who are reclaiming it. Thompson believed that the way people go about critiquing others is very important, which I would agree with. In reading the discussions online, she said she noticed that they perpetuated anti-blackness and misogynoir, or misogyny directed at black women. I can't speak. She said, "I was shocked but not surprised by the way that white disabled people, especially those who claim to be in solidarity with black disabled people, engaged in the conversation. You are not in solidarity with us if your behavior during this time in addressing Lizzo can be read as problematic and offensive." And I would agree with that completely. If you're going to be racist or sexist or anything like that in criticizing a person for doing something, then it's not really legitimate. You're not a fan. You're not really standing up in the right way. What am I trying to say?
You don't get it.
Yeah, you don't get it.
You don't get it. If that's what you're doing.
You may be trying to help white disabled people, but you're ignoring a whole other group of people. This
is so interesting to me. And it will highlight it later, right? But yes, there is this thing where it's like, as communities come together to enact change,
right,
divisiveness within the community can just as quickly create an end game where nothing happens, right? So
derail and distract.
Yeah, it's I don't have an answer for it. It's just interesting. Like, within the gay community, there is a whole thing of like, there are black gays and white gays. And if the black and white gays could just work it all out together, then everything would be so much stronger. But there's so much racism in the white gay community and so much blah, 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 blah. Not to diminish by blah, blah, blah. I'm not diminishing anybody's viewpoint on that. I'm just saying I don't know enough to keep going.
Well, it's the same, or I was thinking that this question is similar to the use of the N-word, where black people say we can use the N-word because we have ownership of it, we're taking it back, we're reclaiming it. It's a little bit different, but it's similar. So saying some people can use a word and some people can't, a word that may be considered offensive. And I just have trouble with it because I know that certain groups of people use the word spaz just to mean sort of freaked out or, whatever. But to me, it comes from the root of the use of the word comes from referring to spastic diplegia. And I don't think it's okay because of that. I don't think that no matter who you are, unless perhaps you have spastic diplegia, that's a separate issue. Then that's something for those people to address.
Sure.
But I don't think it's okay otherwise. It's my personal opinion.
I have never heard the word used in any way other than to be derogatory.
Right. That too, sure.
Yeah, so it's just a word. There are other words.
Yeah. I mean, there are tons of other words. So I agree.
That's true. There are tons of other words.
So back to Lizzo. She has recently released a song, which I find a little weird, but I'd like to have your perspective on it. The new song is called Everybody's Gay, which is a queer anthem about living your best life, turning up, dancing, and just having some fucking fun.
All right.
So what do you as a spokesperson for gay people feel about this?
As king of all gays, what I have to say is...
I mean, everybody's not gay. What is that about? I mean, I understand the point that maybe she's trying to make, but isn't that taking things away from people who are gay? I mean, not everyone gets to be gay.
Gets to be gay. Yeah. Yippee. Yippee. I'll say this. Every artist of a certain stripe wants to have the big summer anthem.
Right.
And so if you can get the gay anthem, then you have a pretty strong chance, because you're getting played in clubs and all that bullshit, of becoming the summer anthem. At least that's how it used to work. Now the music industry has changed so much. I don't know how those drivers fit together anymore.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know either.
I mean, I'd have to hear the song to really.
Okay, that's a good point.
Give my
I don't know what the song
blessing to it, but I'll say, whatever.
On the face of it, you don't have any issues. Fair enough.
Who cares? I mean, I'd rather that than go kill a gay if that was her song. Right. Too many fucking gays. Again. Yeah, so could go the other way. So thank you for your allianceship, your stewardship. What word am I looking?
Yeah,
thank you for being an ally, Lizzo.
Allyhood. I think Lizzo has shown herself to be an ally, so I think at least that she's coming from the right place.
Oh, totally agree. I mean, I don't want to give my rating away just yet, but I will say this was, I'll save it for the apology.
Okay. That part. But going back to what I was saying earlier about being depressed about Roe v. Wade, so she and Live Nation banded together, so to speak, to announce that they would together donate $1 million from the special tour to support abortion access groups. So good for them. I don't know why she teamed up with Live Nation, but whatever. I mean, I don't care. So
aren't they the
for donating $500,000
band promoter?
Yeah.
Theater management thingy.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. Good for them.
I think Madonna owns them entirely now, right?
Probably. I don't know. I hadn't heard that.
A big part of it, whatever. I mean, I guess long story short, they are a force within the touring music world.
Yeah.
So, hurrah, right? Yeah. And then they're progressive because Madonna.
I thought they were the ones that charged tons of money in fees.
They are. I haven't bought a concert ticket.
I haven't bought one from Live Nation for so long. I don't know either, but that was an issue in probably the 90s, so it's probably been resolved since. I don't know. I have no idea.
Or it hasn't, and we just it doesn't matter anymore.
We're used to it now. Yeah. So let's talk about the apology. Her apology said, "It's been brought to my attention that there is a harmful word in my new song, Grrrls, and that's Grrrls, FYI. Let me make one thing clear. I never want to promote derogatory language. As a fat black woman in America, I've had many hurtful words used against me, so I understand the power words can have, whether intentionally or, in my case, unintentionally. I'm proud to say there's a new version of Grrrls with a lyric change. This is the result of me listening and taking action. As an influential artist, I'm dedicated to being part of the change I've been waiting to see in the world. XOXO Lizzo." What do you think about that apology?
Oh, 9.8. Like,
do you think
honestly,
so, really?
Oh, 1,000%. And why? Because I love apologies and I rate them all highly. No, because she actually re-recorded the song at her expense.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's not a cheap thing to get everybody together in the studio.
You have to reissue and all that shit.
Yeah. You got to pay other people again, songwriters again. I don't know if she wrote the song or what have you, but like that, it's not just walking into the room and recording one word and having it swapped out on the track, right?
Isn't it? What if she just re-sang that phrase? Couldn't you just substitute that phrase into there and then? Oh, you do have to reissue it, but I don't know.
You're married to the producer, so you'll have to ask him. And I mean, I have to hear this.
I should have asked him before the podcast.
How dare you not do all of your homework on time?
Sorry. So I have a little bit of a different opinion because I think that the fact that she re-recorded it and did so promptly is excellent. So 10 out of 10 for that. But she didn't really. So when we look at our categories of what makes a good apology, did she express regret? No, she didn't really. She said, "I never want to promote derogatory language." But did she say, "I'm sorry"? Did she say, I wish I hadn't done this"? I mean, kind of. She says, "I understand how words can hurt." But no real expression of regret, no real explanation of what went wrong. She didn't try to say, "I didn't understand that this was an issue," or she kind of implied it in saying, "I never want to promote derogatory language," but she didn't really go into it. She didn't take responsibility and say, "I wrote these lyrics and I take responsibility and I'm sorry." She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't request forgiveness. She didn't say, "Please forgive me. Please understand that I didn't mean to do this and accept my apology." But she did make an offer of repair, and she did repair what she had done. So for that, like I said, 10 out of 10. But overall, I really like Lizzo, and I like what she did here. I think she did the right thing. I would give it a 5 out of 10, though, overall. As an apology, I would give it a 5 out of 10.
Okay. All right. I'm still going to stick with my 9.8.
Okay.
I might come down to 9.5, but I think for me, it's the action that was taken.
That's more important.
Yeah, more important. It points to sincerity. It points to authenticity, right?
Right,
it
right.
Doesn't feel like a career-saving mood.
Just a PR apology.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel like that. It doesn't hurt.
Right. Sure.
So great. And Lizzo does have a brand, which is self-care and loving and all accepting. So, you could argue there's some brand management happening there, but I would also say she just is that way. So it's probably not really brand management. So I don't think the issuance of the apology is self-serving, which for me would knock it further down. But you are right that there are these missing components, and I'm sorry. But she did say that, she was listening, and so
she said this is a result of me listening and taking action. And I guess that's okay. I mean, it kind of struck me as, look how great I am. I listened and took action. But that's probably not what she meant.
Well,
so
maybe that's not what she meant, but also maybe it is. Because that one bit where she said, as an influential artist, when I read that, I was like, I know you are, but humility, Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. So do we accept the apology? Brent suggested we have a part of the thing where we either accept or decline the apology, and I accept the apology.
I totally accept the apology.
All right, good. Lizzo passes.
I think she's great. I listened to a podcast with her, and she, and of course, it was a very self-helpy kind of a conversation, which isn't my thing. I don't love those types of conversations. Whatever about feelings, they don't exist and they're not real.
Right.
But she did say that people tend to hear her first, like they'll stumble across an interview and then they find her music. It's not so much, at least in the beginning, it wasn't so much people listening to her music. It was more people reacting to her, right? Oh, there's this.
What do you mean, like hearing her on a podcast?
Yeah, hearing her podcast, reading an interview about her. Yeah, I mean, that's what she said.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
And so I'm going to say I've heard a couple of her songs, but I really liked her as a person.
Yeah.
I may actually try out some Lizzo.
All right.
And fall into the cliche category of people hear about her first and then discover her music.
Awesome. All right. So we're a pro Lizzo podcast.
Yes. We're pro Lizzo and Billie Eilish.
And Billie Eilish.
Look at us.
We're pro female artist podcast, and some men too, but can't think of any at the moment.
Well, we'll find them. They're there.
So do you have a Who's Sorry Now or an apology expected this week?
I do indeed. But
Yay!
Before that, I want to share with you this documentary on Netflix that's called Crip Camp. Have you seen it?
I've heard about that.
Wow. You run, watch it.
Really?
It is so beautiful. It is so moving.
It's heartwarming.
I cried a lot through it.
Oh no.
Right. But very empowering tears. Right.
Right.
And so this whole thing with Lizzo and the use of that word, I was kind of like looking for what in this story is interesting for me. And it wasn't like who gets to say what words, because that's just a big conversation that's had many, many, many times over. So I figured I won't do that one. So it was like, what are disabled people doing in the world? Like, how are things, right? I'm going to say I can't think of anyone that I know who is disabled. I have friends who might fall within various areas of the spectrum of disabilities, but probably don't identify themselves as disabled, right? And so anyway, whatever, I was Googling like history of disabilities. And so not hard to figure out that, was never really great for people with disabilities for a very long time. Still isn't great.
Great.
But I will say Crip Camp tells the story of the birth of a movement, and why it's really intriguing and interesting is there were cameras here following the leaders of the movement around as they were enacting and enforcing change. And so let me tell you a little bit about Crip Camp, right?
Okay.
And how the passage of Section 504 in the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, how that got passed, and how that led to the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, and how sort of the playing field was a little more equalized in terms of access to public buildings for people with disabilities. Okay. So, Crip Camp, produced by Barack and Michelle Obama. How amazing, right? And it was directed by Nicole Newman and Jim Lebrecht. Jim attended the camp, and it was called Camp Jened. And his story is one of the central points of Crip Camp. And so the film starts off with archival reel footage of 1971 of the campers coming together. And so it's explained to the audience that the campers lived in a world surrounded by able-bodied people, and they were always excluded, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And so when they all get to Camp Jened, it's the first time that some of them have ever seen so many disabled people all together.
Yeah.
And for the 4 or 8 week, because the programs were different lengths of time, so there were 4-week programs and 8-week programs. But we'll say for the summer, it was all about inclusion, right?
Great.
So the counselors were not just caregivers, right? They're actually pot-smoking hippies who are drinking. The kids, and I say kids, it's mostly teenagers, right? Have romances for the first time, are playing sports together for the first time. People who were shy at school because they're in a wheelchair and nobody wants to talk to. Suddenly they're the popular kid, right? Because they're the funny one, and everybody just gets to be a kid. It was a life-changing experience for these Camp Jened teens. And so in 1971, when Jim went to the camp, and he gets to have his first girlfriend at camp, he gets to discover that he is popular. He can be outgoing. Let's see. And so, sorry, I'm getting lost in his story. And it's kind of, so he's the director, and at the camp, they had a video camera. Hard to come by in the 70s, but they had one. And so the film sets up these stories where you look at the person in 1970 when they were 15 years old, right? And then today, and they talk about the experience of being at camp and what happened and how this group of people stuck together, really, and forced the United States government to enact a provision in civil rights law that was not being enforced. So here's the story. So you've got this camp, the kids are all together, and they all meet. And it's a different world for them, and they feel empowered. And they feel empowered because they're helping themselves and they're helping each other, right? The counselors were drunk and stoned. They were not picking a lot of people up and carrying them out into the pool, right? So there was a girl there. Her name is Judy Human. And sorry, lazy writing, but I'm going to forgive it because that one, it's her real name. But Judy Human, let me tell you, she's Judy Superhuman. Thank you. Yes. And you were about to find out why. So after Camp Jened, Judy becomes a teacher, and she ends up suing the Board of Education because of what she termed as discrimination against her access into school buildings. No elevator. She can't get to the second floor. She can only teach on the ground floor, right?
Yeah.
How does she get into the building? And so because of her lawsuit, she helped found an organization called Disability in Action. And so that's about 1971. Disabled people were largely invisible, not really part of the mainstream conversation. And in 1972, Geraldo Rivera, there's a name.
Wow.
The guy who used to do good in the world instead of who he is now, did an expose on a facility called Willowbrook, which was for disabled people and disabled children, really, and straight out of the 1800s. The film crew showed up, walked through, and I like, sure, here's some images, right? And this is aired in 1972 on TV, right? And so naked children curled up in fetal positions on the floor because they can't walk.
Yeah.
Right. And no staff coming to help them. Breakfast was 3 minutes per child, and they show like the nurses just smashing this food into the kids' faces. Right.
What the hell?
I mean, it was fucking horrific. The 35 seconds they showed in the documentary of the original Geraldo Rivera clip.
Yeah.
Gut-wrenching, awful, disgusting, right? And Judy and other Camp Jened kids saw this on TV, right? And at one point, Judy says, I realized that I or any of my friends could very easily have ended up in an institution like that.
Yeah.
Just the stroke of luck that here I sit at home with my parents, right, who are overprotective. And there's that other side of things, too, where life is hard, but could be even worse, right? I hate to say that because that just sounds so like, but true. Yeah. So not because of the Geraldo Rivera show, but these things are in the air, right? This idea of civil rights, this idea of groups getting together and protesting to create change, this idea that young people can make the world a better place, right? And so, and I'll say Judy a lot, right? But there were other people involved in this, but I really felt, and the documentary Crip Camp focuses on her, right? But there were other activists out there. So she's not a one-woman show, but Crip Camp certainly makes it obvious that a lot of this happens because of her involvement. So the Rehabilitation Act of 1972 had a section in it called 504, and 504 said that any organization or institution that gets federal money has to accommodate disabled people. Nixon vetoed this. He said the cost would be too high. You have to get elevators and ramps in at every building across America. Yeah. And this will be a direct quote. How many people will really be served by it? Yeah, so not a surprise, right? So Disability in Action, Judy's group that she helped form, took to the streets in New York. About 50 people in wheelchairs just lined up on 4th Avenue and shut the street down, right? And the cops show up because, okay, well, it's the 1970s. There's protests all the time. The hippies are upset now. Oh, wow, it's a bunch of people in wheelchairs. I am not pushing them out of the street. I am not going to arrest someone in a wheelchair. Nope. Right? They weren't doing it because they were on the side of the handicapped people.
Right. They were just afraid to look bad.
Yeah, it's going to look real fucking bad. Back in the days when the cops cared about how things looked.
About looking bad, yeah.
All right. And so that generates a very almost no press beyond like New York paralyzed for... That was not meant to be. No. New York traffic comes to a standstill, right? Because of a protest by crippled people, but not major national news. Okay, so in about 1973, DIA, Disability in Action, recognized they weren't getting a lot of national coverage, right? So in 1973, a group from DIA recognized that they weren't getting a lot of national coverage, but they weren't sure how to get national coverage, and they recognized they might need some disabled Vietnam veterans with them.
Oh, interesting.
Because the focus at the time was all on Vietnam and protests around Vietnam. So as the soldiers came home and were not well received, you had disabled vets who were not getting the support that they needed. So including them, bringing them into DIA, right, did generate a little bit more press, better photo ops, which does, I hate to say it that way because it does sound self-serving, but there was a need. They recognized something that could help them get what they needed. So Nixon eventually caves in and he signs the bill, and 504 is now law, but there's no enforcement. So there's no punishment meted out against hospitals for not having elevators. Right. Around this time, the Camp Jened people sort of independently, but also because collectively they were still in touch with each other, writing letters and phone calls, etc. A group of them moved to Berkeley, right? Because Berkeley was sort of the central for hippie freedom, rights, protests, etc. And so the Camp Jened people wanted to recreate I'll use the word utopia that they experienced at camp. Mm-hmm. And so they get together, a number of them, and they create something called the Center for Independent Living. Now, how they got a bunch of apartments in the same building, I don't know, right? Okay. There's some of the mechanics I don't know. Uh-huh. But what you had was the group from Camp Jened all living together in the same building, all taking care of each other, right? And so fantastic, great. This includes Judy Heumann. And so because of the lack of enforcement of 504, right, the group recognized that they needed to get some government organization to start taking 504 seriously. Mm-hmm. And they decided that HEW, which is Health, Education, and Welfare, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, would make a great first target. So the protesters understood that the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was the lead agency and that their regulations would become guidelines for all other federal agencies, being the Department of Transportation, HUD, etc. It was crucial that the regulations be strong because ultimately 504 would cover every area that received federal financial assistance. And so the group decides to go to the headquarters for HEW in San Francisco and have a protest outside. And then they got inside the building peacefully and decided that they were going to go up to the 4th floor. Mind you, these are people in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
These are people with crutches, right? So not necessarily easy to get. And there were 200 people. 200 people up to the 4th floor takes time, right?
Yeah.
But they managed to do it. And what they wanted was for Joseph Maldonado, who was the regional director of HEW, to call Joseph Calfano, who was the U.S. Secretary of HEW, so the big guy. They wanted the regional guy to call the big guy in D.C. and just get 504 rolling, right? But during that meeting, it became clear that no call was ever going to be made and nothing was going to happen. They just got a bunch of like non-answers, a bunch of political nonsense.
Yeah, yeah.
All of this is caught on film. Oh. And becomes part of Crip Camp, right? So you actually see people living in the Center for Independent Living, and you actually see the protesters going into the building, and you actually see the meeting with Joseph Maldonado. And so the group of 200 people, and I'll say principally Judy, at least according to the documentary, decide, you know what? We're not leaving the 4th floor. We're not leaving until we get what we want. Them. Yeah. Really, 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 I'll say really again, really powerful. Mm-hmm. And so they decide to stage a sit-in.
Yes.
The news reports it as an occupation army of cripples.
Oh, jeez.
Nice, 1970s. Who took over the 4th floor. So they want everybody out of the fucking building. So they turn off the hot water, right? And it's the 70s. There are protest people. There are strategies for dealing with protesters, right? So they turn off the hot water, but they still have access to water, right? And then the phone lines are cut off. So there's no access to the outside world. Right. And the group was like, okay, well, how are we going to communicate with it? And there were deaf people inside the movement as well. Yeah. And so they went to the windows and signed to people outdoors, right? Clever. Yeah, so they were able actually to get the needs, right? Food, etc. And so through that, the Black Panthers, which is still around, I believe, but was more visible in the 70s, which was an organization that fought for civil rights for people of color, principally Black people. The Black Panthers came and brought food, and one of the leaders reports in the documentary talking to somebody from the Black Panthers and saying, "You guys don't have access to a lot of resources. Why are you giving us food? Right? Thank you, but how and why?" And the spokesperson for the Panthers said, "You guys are trying to make the world a better place for everyone. And so for as long as you're willing to lay on the floor, we're willing to give you food," which amazing, right? So within the group of 200 people, there were leaders, right? And Judy Heumann was one of them. There were a couple of others. And they formed small committees for media relations, committees that figured out how to get food, etc. One of the rules was that everybody had a chance to speak. No meeting could begin until a deaf sign language interpreter was available. Meetings would run until 3 a.m. because everybody got a chance to speak. But it was important that everyone felt as if they were contributing, or not even felt. It was important that everybody contribute and make a difference, right? Because why are you sitting here spending the night on the floor and potentially here for many days if you're not making a difference yourself, right? So it ended up, the occupation, the sit-in lasted 26 days. Again, these were people with disabilities, so no backup ventilators, there were no personal care assistants, no access to catheters. We had quadriplegics who couldn't turn themselves over, who laying in the middle of the floor, right? Eventually, mattresses were brought down. But, and yes, tough. And I share all that to highlight just how much they had to endure in order to be heard, right? And so, as one of the protesters recounted later, she said, "The world wants us dead. We spend every day saying, how am I going to survive?" And that feeling does become anger, but it eventually turns into a drive. So there were hunger strikes. There was a lot of pressure on Judy, a lot of responsibility on Judy's shoulders. And she would say to everybody each day, right, are you going to stay today? Can you stay today? Can you just stay one more day? So Evan White was the only reporter in the Bay Area who was covering this. And he got inside the building. He was able to interview people. He showed up every day. He sort of became the face of this protest for the local San Francisco viewing audience of Channel 7, right? The protesters decided that what they really needed was to step things up. And since they couldn't get to Congress, they decided to demand that Congress come to them. So 2 congressmen actually came to HEW, the 4th floor, to listen to the protesters. And on film, Judy is meeting with the 2 congressmen, and she says, "This is the beginning of a civil rights movement, and we are proud that you are here to help us launch the civil rights movement, which is so long overdue." I mean, I'm going to say you do not want to be on the wrong side of Judy Heumann when she has a microphone in front of her face. She's just really phenomenal. So Califano, who was the U.S. head of HEW, sent basically an assistant down or over to San Francisco to meet with the group, a guy named Mr. Eidenberg. And he shows up to speak with the protesters, and he shares that Califano had a lot of concerns about Section 504. It felt very broad to him. He wondered if alcoholics and drug addicts could be included in the Disability Act. How many hospitals were going to be affected? And then Eidenberg gets up and leaves the meeting and locks himself into an office because it's too much to meet with these people and tell them you're not going to help them.
Wow.
And what was happening on the outside as well is that 504 was getting chipped at and revised, right?
Yeah.
Hospitals didn't want to spend the money on putting in elevators and ramps. Libraries didn't want to have to do that. Firehouses didn't want to have to do that.
Nobody did,
Airports didn't want to have to do it, right? And again, the idea was like, well, there's only one person in a wheelchair in all of Manhattan, so why are we every building have to have a ramp for her, right? And so Eidenberg locks himself into an office, and Congressman Burton gets up, walks over to the office, kicks the door until Eidenberg opens the door and comes back out to resume the meeting.
Wow.
Yeah. And so on camera, we have Judy speaking to Mr. Eidenberg. She starts to explain to him that some of the changes in 504 are broaching on separate but equal, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, you can't have access to every firehouse, but maybe there'll be a disabled firehouse we'll build for you, right? And she brings up Brown versus the Board of Education and how that decision in and of itself applies to equality for all people, including disabled people, right? And she says to him, the harassment, the loss of equality, the harassment, the loss of equity that is being discussed by the administration is so intolerable that I cannot even put it into words. And I would appreciate it if you would stop shaking your head in agreement when I don't think you understand what we are talking about. Yeah, really powerful moment, right? And somebody else in the documentary states that there are moments when you see history shift, and that meeting with Eidenberg was when history shifted. So the group decides after the meeting with Eidenberg to send 25 people to D.C. to try and meet with the president. And Evan White, our local Channel 7 hero, went with them. They went to Califono's office, straight off the plane. Now, wheelchairs, crutches, in an age when the world's not built for them. So, and by them, I mean wheelchairs and crutches. So, you're renting a U-Haul truck, you're loading people onto it, you're strapping them in, right? You're driving them to the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare's home and wheeling them out, right? And they had a candlelight vigil in front of his house. The police showed up and once again sat there and watched because, I don't want to be that guy. It's too easy to punch somebody in a wheelchair. It's no fun.
Yeah.
Right?
God.
You're welcome. And so while the group's in D.C., they start trying to find Carter and initiate contact with him. So they have a little protest in front. It's 25 people. Of course, it's a little protest in front of his church on Sunday morning. And Carter leaves out the side door so that there's no camera op.
Jerk.
And also he doesn't have to, deal with protesters. So let's see here. Okay. So while the group's in D.C., back in San Francisco, the FBI starts to ramp things up and they start harassing the protesters on the fourth floor. They're turning on fire alarms. They're dialing in bomb scares, right? And Judy phones in every day to remind people, you have to stay there, you guys. You can't leave until I call you and tell you that 504 has been signed. Because that's what they were doing. They weren't going to like, we want to be in the papers and we want our story picked up. They wanted a signature. Yeah. That was the goal. That was the end game. That was the whole purpose. And we're not leaving till we get that. So Evan White's filming them. He's in D.C. with them, right? And he's getting ready to send his footage back to Channel 7 in San Francisco. When the impossible happens, which is such a strike of luck, there's a technician strike in news stations across the country. Technicians we want more money, everybody, and better health care and whatever else we want. We want to be able to smoke cigarettes all day long at our desk, not have to go outside whenever they needed. Right? And so there wasn't a lot of news available. But Evan White's footage, which he was sending to Channel 7, was available. And so some strike breakers took his footage and fed it to all ABC affiliates.
Wow.
Here's your news. Here you go. Sorry, you can't have any blank space on TV. And so suddenly this becomes a national news story, right? And Califano, it was fine if it was a news story in San Francisco. Who cares about those hippies, right? But all of a sudden you have grandmothers in Wisconsin and Kansas calling your office to tell you you're a horrible person.
Yeah.
Guess what happened? Oh, he signed 504.
Yay.
There was no news coverage. There was no fanfare. He didn't do it in front of press. He just signed 504. And he states in an interview, the day after, right? I think that this calls for a revolution of attitudes, thinking, and activities on behalf of millions of American citizens. As I mentioned,
Excellent.
the HEU sit-in lasted 26 days and was critical in forcing the signing of these regulations. Kitty Cohn, who was another activist, said, "At every moment, we felt ourselves the descendants of the civil rights movement of the 60s. We learned about its sit-ins from the civil rights movement. We sang freedom songs to keep up morale and consciously show the connection between the two movements. We always drew the parallels. About public transportation, we said we can't even get on the back of the bus." And so it's interesting to hear from earlier your point about Black disabled activists taking issue, right? When the white activists in the 70s in this movement consciously and acknowledged that they borrowed tactics from the Black civil rights movement.
Right.
Yeah. I will say Crip Camp, amazing film. And I haven't even told the half of it.
That is so encouraging, especially now when you think about all the protesting and stuff that we're going to need to do about Roe v. Wade and everything else that follows after it. To think that a small group of people like that can actually make a difference.
And you can, I can, we can.
Right.
It just takes determination and willingness, right? The HEW sit-in was not a bunch of able-bodied people smoking cigarettes and drinking martinis sitting in a waiting room, right? These were people who literally had no showers.
Yeah. And I mean, they probably put their lives on the line in some cases.
Oh, yeah. I mean, undoubtedly, some people did suffer. If you're quadriplegic and you can't turn over, then you eventually
horrible.
get bed sores.
Yeah.
So yeah, just really heartening. And I
Thank you
think
for
you're
that
right.
story. That's a great story for this.
You're welcome. America's hero delivers once again. I may as well have been there.
Thank you, Theo, for what you did to save the F504.
To make the world accessible for people with disabilities. I am a hero. It's true. You're welcome.
So even though you are a hero, do you have a who's sorry now?
I do. So I'm going to say that Crip Camp was life-changing in a way, right?
Yeah.
I was unaware that there is such a thing as disability consciousness because I didn't have it.
Right.
You know, I have a big heart and everybody gets a hug and would be awesome if it was a fair world for everybody and should be. So, you know, absolutely. Am I annoyed when there's a deaf interpreter standing next to somebody? No, not at all. That doesn't bug me one bit. I know people it bothers, right?
Really? It bothers people? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it stupid? I have heard people say, they're just standing there and all the sign stuff. We don't have to just have the words go across the screen. Come on.
I'm rolling my eyes.
I think it's cool. I know. Same.
Okay.
So I used to love Helen Keller jokes.
Oh, God, you did. I remember.
I collected some. I know some amazing jokes and always find them funny. And then while I was watching Crip Camp, I was thinking about me and my relations with people with disabilities. And it was like, oh God, all those Helen Keller jokes, you can't tell them anymore because, well, I found them funny. The thing I was missing was, anyway, sure, Helen Keller, it's 1800s, fine. She's almost a mythic, fictional character in my head, not real, right? Kind of funny. And that is how I discharge unease through genius comedy. And so, yeah, no, they're funny because she's disabled. And that now makes them not funny to me. The thing that made them funny is now the thing that, and I'm embarrassed to say that never occurred to me once.
Oh, wow.
Never.
Interesting.
Yeah. Not one. All that ever occurred to me was, You mean you've never heard this Helen Keller joke? Oh my God. Okay, here you go. Ready? That's all I live for. And so
look at you growing and changing.
I know the show's having an influence on me. So I am
You truly
sorry.
are America's hero.
Yes, and I'm humbled too. Okay, what about you? Apologies expected. Who's sorry now?
I have an apology expected, and this comes from the New Haven Register and also from the ASC Review, an article by Patsy Newitt, and the ASC Review, I believe, is an anesthesiology publication. But Yale is being sued by dozens of patients who are saying that the staff at the Yale Health System Reproductive Clinic should have known that instead of giving fentanyl to the patients for anesthesia, they were being injected with saline.
Oh.
Right? So because of this switch, dozens of women underwent fertility surgeries with no pain relief.
Oh.
The plaintiffs say that Yale showed carelessness and recklessness in not preventing a diversion of at least 75% of the fentanyl stored at the clinic by one nurse, whose name is Donna Montacone, who pleaded guilty March 1st to one count of tampering with a consumer product. The suit claims Yale is liable because it was alerted to the problem with its supply of fentanyl through patients' intraoperative screams and post-operative reports of torturous pain, but it didn't investigate. Instead, the problem was attributed to, get this, the unavailability of an anesthesiologist.
Well, what? I mean...
what?
That would also sounds like a problem.
That? I mean, that's a problem, too.
I know.
Hello? If you don't have an anesthesiologist and you're... I can't even start. So the suit claims that Yale took no responsibility for the fentanyl substitution and blames the single nurse who was able to steal the fentanyl unabated for more than 20 weeks. That's 5 months.
Wow. And I wonder how many people she killed on the outside by selling that fentanyl.
Oh, I bet she took it, but I don't know. Maybe she sold it too. So, good Lord. How could you even have one surgery with no anesthesia and not figure out there's a problem and do something about it? But instead you have 5 months.
Are you ready? I have the answer for you.
How?
You're not going to like it.
They're women?
Women are hysterical.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure you were in a lot of pain. Yeah.
If they were men, I wonder what would happen. If there was even
the country would have been shut down.
That's right. Oh, God. So, yeah, I'm expecting an apology from Yale University for this, if not the loss of a big, fat fucking lawsuit.
I hope so, because I would love to would I love to cover that? No, because it sounds like there's a lot of stuff in there I wouldn't want to know. But
right.
Holy moly.
I can't believe it.
I do believe it, but I also can't believe it. But it's Yale.
So you do believe it more or you believe it less?
Yeah.
You do believe it more?
They have a really good English department, but I think that's kind of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't kept up with Yale.
Well, there's a reason why.
Sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it for me. I don't have anything else. Any other good news to impart today? It's been all one bad thing after another, but thank you for bringing some enlightenment and uplifting news to us, Theo. So thank you so much.
And remember, get out there. You can make a difference.
You can make a difference. It's proven by this story today. So thank you. All right, everybody. Have a great week.
Take care.
We love you. See you later.
Bye. We love you.
We do, though. Bye. Thank you for listening to Apologies Accepted, the podcast.
You can find links to the articles and the sources in the show notes.
To submit an apology or find out more, visit us at apologiesaccepted.net, where you can also find our merchandise.
We're on Twitter at Apologies Accepted.
And on Instagram at apologies.accepted.
You can support our important work at Patreon.com/Apologies Accepted.
And fuck Facebook.
Bye.
Bye.